All right, welcome back to the long overdue second live stream about using ETC Eos or EOS, depending on where you've heard it from, where you've learned it. I've got some feedback on my pronunciation. It's the way I learned it first a long time ago. But either way, I think the official way is EOS. But this is version 3.2.9. This is the second in a series. In the first series, we dealt with conventional lights, patching them from absolute scratch, setting them up and augmented so you can visualize what you're seeing here, some basic Q-stack work. And so we're going to pick up from here and add some intelligent lights to the mix. So we're going to jump right into it. And what I'll do here is I'll go here into patch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find some channels here. Let's just set those at starting at channel 10. So I'm going to go 10. T for through 16, so that's going to grab that bunch of channels. And the first thing you want to do, especially when you're patching non-dimmers, is to select your fixture type. And then from here, you can see all the fixtures that are already in your show file. You can navigate by manufacturer here, or you can also just search if you know what you're looking for. So for example, if I want to do a color source, I can just type in part of it and you can see the source fixtures, and you can see I'm going to do a Fresnel V. And then just to explain these, it's kind of important to know when it comes to moving fixtures, there's a couple things you see here. And for the color source Fresnel V, you have 1 channel, 6 channels. You have a direct 9 channels, an RGB and a standard, and that is all one fixture. And those are the 5 different modes, or sometimes called personalities, the fixture can be put in. The most important thing is to make sure the personality that you choose here also is what's set on the fixture, because if not, if you have this selected on the wrong one, the fixture won't control the way you're expecting it to. And so let's see if I have a good example here. So if we look at here on the 4-channel mode, you can see how the channels are set up. Channel 1 is red, then green, then blue, then zoom. So DMX parameter 4 is zoom. But if the fixture was in standard, when I'm affecting channel 4, which I think is zoom, we're actually changing the blue color of the fixture. And so you can see how that could really give you some very unexpected results. I had a person who set up a bunch of moving fixtures for me once, and on one of the fixtures, they had selected a different personality than what we had agreed upon, and ran into exactly this thing. So it's important they're in the same channel mode. Also, sometimes you'll see that the channel modes here don't exactly match what you're seeing on the fixture itself. A couple things you can do there. You can click on fixture notes, and you can see some notes here. You can see when it was released. And there might be some notes here, like to set menu, option control to RGB for this personality. And you can see DMX and RDM have been tested on this fixture. And so these notes can be really helpful, and you can see it varies by selection here. I've seen other notes such as requiring certain firmware versions of the hardware or other notes in there. So if these aren't lining up with what you're expecting, this is where I would look is under fixture notes. But under parameters here really quick, I'll point out one other thing. This is new in version, I believe it's 3.2, maybe 3.1 or 3.0, but it's been around for a while, which is this like CIE color space icon. And what that means is this fixture has actually been color profiled by ETC. And so if you build a show with files or fixtures all that have this color profile in there, you're going to get the best possible match for when you're using color palettes to get a consistent color output. It's going to do the best job it can based off of what the fixture is capable of, not every fixture, because of the way they're built and the number of emitters they have. Like this has red, green, blue, indigo, lime. And so this is going to be able to create colors that just a RGB, red, blue, green is not going to be able to. And so even if they're both color profiled, it's going to get as close as possible. So it's helpful to work with those. However, you might find yourself in a situation where you're working with fixtures, none of which have color profiles. You have 2 choices at that point. If you just run without them, you'll end up in a situation where they'll be close, but you might have to tune them a little closer by hand. The second thing is there is instructions on the ETC website about how to color calibrate your fixtures. Needs a light meter. There are the base one that they talk about. It's like $1,800, $2,000 for the like proper professional tool. But look on the internet, you can find cheaper ways to kind of do it. Obviously, you kind of sometimes get what you pay for, but it allows you to take even non-profiled fixtures and make them profiled. And so that's a subject for another video. I think there's probably a good official training video on how to do that. But just to call out what this little icon here means. So we're going to use that one. And conceptually, we pretend that those are the, we're setting it to the direct 9 mode on the fixtures themselves. So I'll just press enter. So now you see that adds up all in here. While I'm here, I'm going to press L while all those channels are selected. And I'll just say backlight, wash. And then we're going to give these some addresses. I don't remember if we went before on universes or addresses. I'm going to press A for address, 2/1. So this is pretending it's universe 2, starting at address 1. And you can see how it automatically indexes those by the number of channels. So 1 to 9, 10 to 18, 19 to 27, and so forth. But you also have the ability to add some spacing in there. So I could say instead at 10, and then I'm going to say, I believe it's offset 1. And if I press that, and it says address is already in use, we want to overwrite those. Oh, no, not offset. Let's see. There is a way. I'll put how to in the comments below. There is a way to have it address where it actually is spacing those out. It's not +1, is it? Nope. Where you can have those space out, where it's skipping addresses. Honestly, I don't remember at the time. I'll have to look that up and get back to you. But as you can see now by doing that, which I honestly thought might not work anyways, you can see that we have address 210 to 18, and then it picks up 19 to 27, 28 to 36. But now we've added in channel 10, this part 2, which is 2/1, which is not what we want. And it also shows up as a dimmer. Part channels here, I think we may have talked about in the first live stream, but those are set up so that you could have like a conventional fixture with a color scroller in front, or so one fixture that you might be controlling more than one attribute across. But right here, I just want to do channel 10. And then if I click up here on the face panel, you can see our options here. And what we want to do is choose part, which I think, I'm trying to remember here. That's cell / ooh. I work with an older console that doesn't have the layout like this. I thought it was /, but apparently not. Let's see, Mark sleep. I know someone here is screaming at their screen right now saying it's right there in front of you. Mark, yeah. There shouldn't be any of those. Is it P? It is P. Okay. Yeah, so channel 10, part 2, and then under here I can just say unpatch and hit that again, and it removes that patch and it removes those separate parts there. Man, that was painful to do live here, but in any event, we've got our fixtures there. Just like before, we don't see them in our augmented space because we haven't given them positions. So we're going to come here into augmented, and what we're going to do here is, you remember, X is left and right, and then Y is depth of stage. So we're going to set those back there. And for trim height, I forgot what we used earlier, but I'll just kind of maybe visually do this here. And then what we're going to do is kind of rotate around the space here on the stage and just kind of visually do this here as far as spacing. Again, in reality, you would actually set like actual trim heights here. And so there, our Y, as far as what direction that's going, versus X, as far as our degrees. There we are there, and That's roughly what we're looking for. And then as you remember, for our X or our left and right, and we're going to spread these out. I don't remember. Let's click on this fixture and see. So that's at, let's clear all these channel selections and we'll select just this fixture. So that's at -10. So we'll do the same sort of display. So I'm going to go back channels 10 through 16. I'll select my X and I'll put -10 through 10, enter. And so now we can see that those are splayed out, and it looks like, oh, when I patched this, I guess I patched only fixture, or I only set the physical position of 10. So 18, 27, and 43, 18, 21, 43. So okay, so that looks about right. Looks like I accidentally added a part fixture back in there. So unpatch that. So 10. Good, those positions all match, which is great. So now we've got these fixtures there. I'll minimize this so you can see this just a little bit better. So there are our light fixtures. We've patched those, and now I'll go press F1 to go into live, and then we'll do some ML controls of those. So I'm going to go 10 through 16. Right now, I'm going to record those right now into group 10 just to save a bunch of time. So record group 10. So now those fixtures are all in one group. And so we can control intensity just like we've done on everything else. And then the parameters on this fixture, we have things like zoom, so I can increase my zoom there. And I can change any color parameter here. I can grab and just drag on the CIE wheel. I can manually manipulate the intensities of each emitter as exposed here. Or what you can do is we can go into the color picker. So I'll bring that up here, color picker. And so instead of just selecting on there, which is just choosing a place in color space, we now have these other options here. In fact, what we'll do, let's bring this full screen just so you can kind of walk through the color picker. I don't think we spent much, if any, time in the color picker on the prior one since we were dealing with conventional lights. However, what we've got here is, I'll just start by clicking Lee. So here are all the Lee colored gels back in the days when we had gels that we put in front of fixtures. It becomes a great aid for those of us that have memorized gel colors that we've worked with. I use this as at least a starting point. And so they've got all the Lee, the Roscoe Lux, the Super Gel, the E-Color, Roscoe Other, GAM, Apollo, and standard colors are kind of like a generic palette here. But we'll stick with Lee. In fact, I'll go with Roscoe first. So what you've got here is a couple other options here. So brightest here, or spectral or hybrid, has to do with the color science on how it's going to make that color. When you've got a fixture that has more than red, blue, green, there is more than one way to make this specific color right there, because if you've got lime, it's like, okay, how much lime versus green are we using? And those things come into play here. And so brightest is going to maybe not be a perfect match, but it's going to be the brightest that's very close. On the convert, or on the reverse, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got spectral, which just means it's going to make the most accurate color, but it may not be nearly as bright. And then we've got hybrid, which is kind of a midway point between the two. And so depending on your application, you're going to choose this. If I had a set with lots of still conventional and LED fixtures or intelligent fixtures, I would probably choose spectral. If I was doing a rock concert, I'd probably do brightest, because color accuracy, fine color accuracy, is really secondary to bright lights. And then if you are somewhere in the middle, maybe you use hybrid. But we're going to stick with brightest for right now. And then the sorting order, if I click hue sort, this sorts them by color hue. You see a couple of outliers here, and we'll come back to those in a second. If I click it again, and that's now deselected, you see that it goes in numerical order. And so the numerical order is great for those of us that have been doing lighting with since the days of gel. So I'm looking for Roscoe 127 or 125 or 127 is what I meant to say. 127 is right there. I know where to find it. If I'm sorting by hue, it gives me a nice hue spread, but now it's like, okay, where's 127? Oh, 127 is right there, right? So might be a little harder to find it because the hue order is different than the color order or the numerical order. So we'll leave that on, actually we'll leave that there on hue, sort hue. Similar is similar to the color that I've currently got selected. So these are the, if I find a color here I like, but now I actually want to refine it down to a specific gel color. That's what similar helps me with. And then right here, this shows the gel, as it says, as gel plus lamp output. And if I click it again, you see how all those colors kind of shift again. And if it shows here, it says show gel against a white background. And so this has to do with, is it what the gel looks like in a swatch book when you're holding it up against a white background, or actually in most of the gel books, there was a card in there that was white. So what does it look like against that versus what does it actually look like when it's coming through the lighting fixture? And I believe, I'd have to check, I believe this is when it's set to a color temperature of 2700, and I don't think you can change that, but I could be wrong on that. So in any event, you can see how everything shifts around here because it's shifting on whether it's on a white background or basically through the fixture, or what the resulting color is when you're showing it through a lighting fixture. Show, these are the colors that are in use in my show. And so the benefit of using these color swatches here is, again, if you've got lighting fixtures that have the same, that are all color profiled, and ideally with the same sort of emitter system, even if they're different fixtures from different manufacturers, clicking on a specific gel here will give you the most similar result in the real world. By all means, there's no reason why you just can't find a color here you like, and then maybe we click around a little bit until we find or adjust it the way we want to. But this is the gel system. What's also helpful under color system, or standard colors, we've got red, 75 red, 50 red, 25% red, and white. But then we've got all the color temperatures ranging from 2700 Kelvin all the way up to 6400 Kelvin. Really kind of a side note, kind of funny. It doesn't represent it well here on the screen, neither, and since there's no like official swatch. What's really interesting is just about every lighting fixture and every camera and everything that deals with color temperature in the entertainment space deals with Kelvin often in 10 degrees Kelvin increments, when the reality is, and again, this doesn't illustrate it really well, here it makes it look like there's a smooth gradation between 2700 Kelvin and 6400 Kelvin. And the reality is everything here is in what we would perceive as the orange space. And then right around here, everything else is really in the blue space. The Kelvin for temperature and color temperature is not linear. And so great point to jump off to another video and maybe research that a little bit more at another time. But it's a really interesting thing when you get in to see that, you know, really we need these color temperatures in the real world should increment in what we'd say is equal hue differential as opposed to equal number. If that might sound weird, we use so many other things, especially in video and film, that are also logarithmic when we think about shutter speeds, when we're talking about film ISO, when we're talking about iris, those are all logarithmic. We don't increment iris by 0.1 f-stop or 1 f-stop. It's nonlinear. When we look at like shutter speeds, they're not exactly doubling, but you know, you've got 60 and then you've got 125 and then you've got 250 and then 500 and then 1,000th of a second increments. They're not linear. So just kind of a little rant on that interesting thing about color science. Lots to learn about color science. But for most lighting people, you choose a color. Does that look the way I want? One last thing on color science is when I'm lighting and I'm dealing with colors, I'm evaluating is the color I'm looking for related to the, we'll come back here and say, do I want the color to be related to the light that I see on the stage, which has to do with the way the color light reflects off of a surface? Do I care about the color cast of the beam itself, so you can see the simulated haze? Or am I really looking for the result of what does it look like when I'm looking at the lens element of the lighting fixture? And depending on your application and your type of show, the priority or which one has the significance, which one's more significance, whether it's the light emitting from the fixture, the haze, where it's hitting like reflected against the floor, or perhaps the way it reflects off of a person. Those sorts of things might matter. The way we get light reflecting off of people might matter more. And so color can be a lot more than just, I like that green, but it's like, what's that green doing here or there or there or bouncing off of a person? In fact, what we should do here real quick. So we'll take those fixtures and we're just going to move them so that they're actually casting shadows on these fake people here. And we'll make that smaller and stuff. And so you don't get what you get in real life, which is a halo effect necessarily shown here, but there still is an impact of that. And so is what this is doing, is the way it's catching the hair on a person, like all those things matter. And maybe it looks great in the air, but it doesn't look great on the person or vice versa. And so those are all the things we're looking at. Like as a lighting designer, those are features or elements that carry significance to me. But that was a long time on color. We'll move forward. So I'll go back to ML controls here. We can see the fixtures here. And so on these lights, here are the parameters available. So we've got this intensity, color, and form. In the official training, they'll talk about ICFB. So I is intensity, F is focus, and then C is color, and then beam are these three priorities: form, image, and shutter. So basically everything that impacts the way I'm looking at the light. Focus has to do more with positional, so the focus or where the light is pointed to. And so for a lot of people, this confuses them because they think of focus like focusing a camera, how sharp the beam is. But focus in this context is back in the days when we had conventional lights, when we talked about focusing light, it was largely more about where are we pointing the light versus is it a sharp or blurry image. So that's where focus comes in. So intensity, focus, color, and form. And when you're looking at a face panel here, you can I guess it doesn't show it on the virtual face panel because it doesn't make sense. But on a regular fixture, you'll have, or on everything except the flagship consoles, you'll have 4 rotary encoders across the top here. And then across the bottom, you'll have the buttons ICFB. And so those are how you choose between those categories and the functionality of those buttons. And then from there, so we'll go across these. If I click on intensity, it just kind of shoots me over there as our intensity section. And if I home the intensity, make sure I'm in live mode. Let's do that. Channel 10 through 16, and then we'll be in ML control. So if I home the intensity, it sets it back to whatever the home value is for those fixtures. And then, of course, I've got max and min, and I can home here. And in most of the fixtures you're going to deal with, you might have only one intensity, but some fixtures, especially those that have multiple faces or segments or light emitters, you might have more than one intensity shown. From here, if I click on color, you can see everything color. What's nice about ML controls is it only shows you the parameters that you can actually control with this fixture. And so we've got color here. I can home that, which typically they home to white. And then the minus on these will collapse them, so I'll expand color. And then this lets you choose the color picking method. So you've got HS, which is your hue, so going around the circle of hue, and then saturation is closer to the circle or outer or further from the center. And as you can see, this circle is not perfectly a circle, and that's because this fixture has some degree of color profiling, so it knows that, I can get to that blue, but if you click all the way out here, that blue, even though it's showing on augmented, isn't actually within the capabilities of that fixture to produce. So if you click here versus there, it's probably not going to make any visible difference. So that's hue and saturation. X and Y, this is also our XY CIE chart, and then gel brings up that color picker that we saw before. I usually use it in the XY configuration. Over here you see the colors are expanded, and these are based off of the emitters. So we've got red, lime, green, blue, indigo. But then beyond that, we've got these two, which are called virtual channels, so they're not actually necessarily a channel that's present on the fixture, but it's doing the color math for you. So as I scroll up on hue, you can see it's changing the hue, but it's not changing the saturation. It's still kind of that soft, not super saturated color. If I can fit both of these on the screen, and let me go back here to hue and saturation, you'll see that as I do this, it's really just doing a circle. It's orbiting around the color space here. And then saturation, again, more saturated, moves it towards the out, less saturated, moves it in, which gives us our really pale colors. But you can see as I move hue here, we're just orbiting around this hue saturation wheel. And so just to show you how those work. And if you've got a fixture that's got red, blue, green at minimum, then you are going to see hue and saturation as a virtual channel in almost every profile. I'm not sure if there's anything I can think of that's not the case. There are other parameters. So under form, you can see, actually, I guess, interesting, the cooling fans, for whatever reason, are under color. And so here, cooling fans, you can control some parameters like this. And so here you've got auto, off, speed of 1%. You can set the speed to 100, auto to. And so you can actually control that as a parameter. I'm honestly not sure why we would control that intermittently throughout a show. Maybe I could see doing that, but that sounds like a parameter that would be one that would be could catch you off guard by accidentally, say, setting it off or 1% and then forgetting to ever re-engage it. But it is available here. Moving beyond that, we've got within our form elements, we've got zoom. So that's like how zoomed it out, how zoom it is. These are Fresnel fixtures. They're not going to have a sharp edge. And again, that's where augmented really is a programming tool and less of a visualizer, because that's not how I would expect those fixtures to be in real life. Take a quick look here. Yeah, those are Fresnels. Okay, just double checking that those were Fresnels and that I wasn't didn't patch a different color source fixture in there like a spot. Okay, so moving on from here, shutter strobe. So there are shutter strobe options. So example, I can have pulse here or flicker, and then you set the parameter here. And how every fixture works with strobe and flicker is different. So there's a nice random one. I think about the only time I will reach for the built-in shutter strobe is literally for this random effect. Outside of that, I tend to do my strobes just within an effect within the Q stack. But there we are. Those are the parameters available on these fixtures. So we've got that nicely set up. So let's move on to adding in a couple more fixtures. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and do some Q stack work with these. Okay, so if we look, we're sitting in the out queue. And so I'll hit spacebar to go into the first queue. And since those are manual values and there's no values asserted within the first queue for these, you can see that those values retain to their manual values. If we come here to live summary, you can see that they are selected and read. Another thing to note that I often tell people, I don't know if this was in the first video, but even if these values were set within Q1, because not only are they manual, but they're selected. Selecting kind of helps shield them from taking any new values or being affected by the queue you're going into. But that's only queues that are both manual and selected. So at this point right now, I'm just going to press update and enter. And now when I go out of this queue, so I'll go back to queue out, and when I come into this queue, what you'll see is the fixtures come up. And what you may not see here is, let's do this. I'm going to take 1 through 6 out, and those are manual. So now I'll go back to Q0, and I want you to watch the color as we come up on these. So I'm going to go into Q1 here. And you can see how they start white and then go green. And so this is now getting into the area of what we call marking queues. And so this is super essential. There are 2 ways the console can work as. So if I go under setup here, display, setup, and I believe it's under user settings. Let's see, maybe it's under system. This is what happens when you don't plan things out and you just do a live stream. Okay, so under systems, queue settings, auto mark is disabled. You can enable it. We're going to leave it disabled for now. The choice of auto mark really comes down to this, which is if you are programming a show and you never want to see things come up, or you never want to see things moving while they're coming up, which might be changing colors, changing position, anything like that. If more than 50% of your cues, you want it to come up looking right the first time, then having auto mark on is probably the right way to go, and it's probably what you want. On the flip side, if you're working for concerts or situations where more than 50% of the time you actually want to see a light that is currently off, and then as it comes on, it might pan, it might tilt, it might shift color. If more than 50% of the time you're doing that, and I can think of like concert lighting is probably the biggest place. Some worship lighting, depending on your environment, might be like that. Dance recitals, almost always like that. Those are cases where I leave auto mark off. And since most of the time I live in those sorts of productions, I use auto mark off. And since I'm so acclimated to marking manually, those few cases where I'll go and do the symphony or something down at the Performing Arts Center, I just mark manually anyways, because I'm just accustomed to that workflow. But if you're finding more than 50% of the time, you want lights to just come up as you've set them, auto mark is your friend. So that's a parameter to know, and we're going to work with auto mark off for right now. The reality is that there's nothing to train with auto mark on necessarily. It just does all the work we're going to show you here automatically for you, so it saves you some time. So what we're going to do here is we'll go back, make sure we're in live, so F1, and then control backspace. So as you see again, as we come up, and it might be hard just to see on the way things render because, again, we're talking about green. So I'm going to go 10 through 16, and instead I'm going to grab deep red. And we'll update that. And again, I'll take 1 through 6 out. So control backspace. And so now it should be a little more obvious when we come into it. We're coming up into it from white, and it goes pink before it finally gets to our saturate red. So that's probably not what we want. And so how we're going to take care of that here is I'm going to just take 1 through, or let's kind of wreck this whole thing. So first of all, I'm going to take 10 through 16. I'm going to say at enter, which is going to remove the parameters, and update. So now we've got no front light, no backlight. Q1 literally is nothing. And as we continue to kind of wreck our prior show file, I'm going to delete Q1. And so now we've got Q1 and Q3. I forgot what Q3 does. Okay, we've got a spotlight on one person there. Perfect. So control backspace, or control space to get us back. So I'm going to take 10 through 16. And again, we'll set red, and we'll set a value of full. And then, let's see, I need to zoom these out. So there we go. That's nice. And so I'm now going to record a brand new Q2. So in Q1, nothing. In Q2, you actually see how when we come up into it, not only now is it turning red, but they're also zooming out. And so that, again, that might be, maybe that is the look you want, like this swell into a song. And so the lights are both zooming or zooming out, as well as turning from white to red. And so now we're going to talk about the first thing we'll do, which is we'll talk about marking those cues. And so what we'll do here is I'm going to take channel 10 through 16. And then on the face panel here, you'll see that we've got this mark, which is K. So I'll press mark, enter, and then I'll hide the face panel here. So now you see these little M's show up here, but they're red, which shows our manual data. So if you went somewhere else, you'd lose that. So I'm going to press update. So I'm going to update that now into Q2. And so now we've updated our mark here. And then we still have timing data here. So I'm going to modify this just a little bit because I'm not going to deal with timing as much right now. So I'm going to move the timing, and I'm going to bring the flags in, which we hid during part 1. And so now all of a sudden we see lots of stuff going on here. We see an R for a reference. In fact, that's probably worth showing what it was before we marked it. So maybe we'll undo this real quick. So we'll do Control X for undo, and I'm going to remove the update. Great. So now when we come back into it, what you see here is in Q2, and I'll give it a label, red backlight. And you can see that now you've got this L, and L stands for a live move. M for move, L for live. So what it says is, as the light's coming on, it is moving in a way that you may or may not want, right? So for reference, D means dark move. So we've got something that's moving in dark. It's setting some sort of value in the dark. And so we can see some values there. So if I 10 through 16, and then R means reference. So that means that we're a reference for a prior move. But what we're going to do here, let's focus on these reds here real quick. So we'll do that again, 10 through 16. K for mark, enter. So we get our red M's. Update, enter. And now what you see is that L goes away and we get R for reference. And then up here, X plus means that it has both move and reference data in it, which is fine. So if I do Control Shift back, and I'll go all the way back to Q0 or Q out. So when we go into Q1, you can see these MK with an M. So it means they're marking, and Q2 says we're marking for the values in Q2. And so now I'll go next again. And so now when those come up, they're at their right zoom and color. And so they're just coming up where they need to be. Now, back in the older days, we used to do what were called manual markings. And so, well, I guess before I go there, I should mention that if we had auto mark on, by virtue of just creating this Q2 and saving those red parameters, because the Q before it, those fixtures were off, it would have automatically done the equivalent of mark update for you, so that this is happening all the time. So it saves a couple of keystrokes if more than 50% of the time you are doing that function. However, if half the time you need to not have those mark, you want those to zoom out or change color, then you're going to be basically doing the same commands but in opposite every time you don't want to do it. So because of that, it really depends. Where do you fall? 50% of the time, are the lights always going to be doing something while coming up from being dark into light or not? And so, again, very situationally, depends on what you need to do. And so here we can see again as we come back into it, because there's our mark that's coming up. Now, back in the old days before mark was a thing, what we used to do, in fact, there are still lighting consoles today that don't support the concept of mark, which is kind of crazy to me. And so if we got rid of marks, I'm going to take 10 through 16, I'll hit mark again and enter. And then now that removes the mark. And so when we go back, you can see as we come into it, it does our zoom in and everything. So back in the old days, how did we work around this idea of not having mark? Well, what I'd do is I'd go into Q1, I'd say Q10 or channels 10 through 16. And actually what you can do here to make your life easy, I can say recall from Q2, enter. And so what that has done is it has recalled. Oh, I just noticed on my screen recording software, it doesn't show you the face panel here. So let's hold on one moment here and let's get that going for you. Okay, so I think now if I do this, Hey, look at that. We've got a face panel now. Excellent. Okay, great. Sorry about that. So here's the face panel. When I've clicked up here and I'm looking at stuff, this is what you've been missing. So let's make sure you've got that now. Sorry about that. And it looks like on our display here, we are just barely missing. Nope, I guess we're good. Sorry about that. Just cut that out of the corner of my eye. Okay, so let's close the face panel here. And we'll make that smaller. And so back what we would do is in the old days is we'd actually set the color and the zoom, but the intensity to out and update that into the queue. And so because of that, now you end up with these dark cues. So when I move into it, behind the scenes, you can't see it, but it is actually setting my color and intensity. Looks like there's some marks in there too. That's probably left over from the prior show. So let's clean those up. Yeah, there we go. Great. So when we come into this, now behind the scenes, you can't see it because the lights are off, but it's setting color and intensity. And then if I go into the next cue, because the color and zoom has been set, all that's changing now is the intensity. And because of that, we just see them come up. And where we might see that much better here is, here we go. So in this view here, you can see the expanded all the parameters here. So now if I go to Q out, you can see that these color sources here, the red, lime, green, blue, indigo are all set to 100%, and the zoom is at 13%. That's its home value. And then now when we go into this queue, even though you can't see it because the intensity is still at 0, behind the scenes, all of the colors are adjusting and the zoom. So that when I go into the next queue, you can see the only thing changing here is the intensity. And so this is what we used to do, which was dark moves or move while dark or presetting your parameters. The problem comes into now, and this is the way we used to do it, and why you don't want to do it this way normally, probably in most cases. I'm going to say channel 10 through 16. I'm going to go to the color picker. I'm going to choose this nice green, and I'm going to update it only in Q2. And now if we go to Q out, and we'll bring the live tables up, watch what happens. When I go to Q1, it is still setting green because that's what we had set. And then when I go to the next Q, it is coming up in green or red, and then it's turning to green. And so now it's like, oh shoot, now I've got them out of sync. And that's why you see D for dark move and then L for live move saying, hey, wait, we're doing something different than what's in the queue before. And so we're actually having the color change. And so how we clean all this up, I'll go Q1, channels 10 through 16, at enter. So that removes it, sets everything back to home. Update, enter. And so we've kind of cleared that out. And so now I can come into Q2, 10 through 16, K for mark, enter, update, enter. Oops, I need to, I think I was sitting in the wrong queue. So let's be in Q2, 10 through 16, mark, enter, update, enter. And so now we see the live go away. We see the D show up because there's move and dark and the X. So now if I back all the way up, we go into Q1. We are marking for Q2, which is exactly what we're looking for. And when I go into this one, you see all of those color parameters stay exactly where they are, and we just come up in the green that we're looking for. So maybe not the most clean example, but that gives you an idea of exactly how marking works. And this is on something as simple as just color and zoom. Obviously, you can imagine moving lights being perhaps a little more involved than that. And so why don't we go into that next? So I'm going to go delete cues 1 through 3, enter, enter to get rid of everything. Then I'm going to say go to Q out. So that was Control G and then O for out, enter. So that's going to kind of give us a clean slate. And then let's throw some moving lights into this patch. So I'm going to go to patch, and now I'm going to grab 20 through, we're going to grab 4 fixtures. So 20 through 24, patch, type. This time we'll use the manufacturer. So I'll come down here. High-end systems. So we have all of our high-end fixtures here that we can go through. And lots of options that we can see here. And let me see if I can find what I'm looking for. Halcyon Gold, bright standard. And you can see the downside of this is we don't have any of our color profile information. So for some reason I thought it would, or maybe those just don't have. If I type in high-end gold, you can actually see they're all profiled, which is kind of more what I was expecting. And then you can see the different modes we're going to be in. I'm going to choose the Pan 540, 75 channels. So I'm going to select that, and then we're going to set that at universe 3, so 3/1 for universe 3, starting at address 1. And then again, we'll go down to augmented. I'm going to move those. Let's move those upstage as well. So upstage behind our talent. And then our X will do, again, that -10 through 10. And as you can see, they're flipped upside down, which isn't helpful for us. So I can hit that, and then that again. So now 180, so they're facing up. And then now the question would be is, because these are moving head fixtures, are they moving the way we want them to? And so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into live this is a 12 or 20 through 24. I'll record that as group 20. I'll bring those up. And so now when we go to ML controls, you'll see there's a lot more parameters to choose from. But the first thing I'm going to focus on is my pan and tilt. So when I tilt these, do I think when I go this way that that's the direction they go? Should up come towards me, or should it go the other direction? And so in my mind, I want this to go the same direction the fixtures are going. So we'll go back into patch. And then in patch, I can go to attributes, and I need to select that group again. And so you've got these invert pan or tilt. And so depending on the setup of the fixture and how things are going, sometimes I'm just going to invert the tilt here. So now when I go into live, group 20, moving lights controls, now when I go up, that's where the lights go. Of course, now the second thing to determine is when I go this way, do I want it to go left or do I want it to go right? And so you can flip them there. If you're having trouble with that, where in reality you sit here and we flip this, but that's not what it's doing in real life. Sometimes what it is you've got to flip or rotate your fixture in augmented to make it match what's happening in real life. But for the programming environment here, I'm not going to worry about reality. I'm just going to worry about how it looks and interacts here. And then we can sort that out when we are in the venue. So again, I'll go group 20, moving light control, and I'm going to home the pan, but I'm going to leave the tilt going out. And so there we are. And so we'll talk about some of these parameters here real quick. I'll do it on this screen just so that we've got more real estate. So I'm going to come into here. I'm going to go into ML controls. And so you can see a much larger expanded list of parameters to control. And here you see the intensity, focus, color, form, image, and shutter are all illuminated in gold, which means there's something for everything in here. And what every fixture has capable of is kind of beyond the scope here, but we'll just kind of review these real quickly. Single intensity, pan and tilt, X, Y, Z we'll get to in here in just a moment about positions. Those are what we call virtual positions. Those only will show up if you've got them in a physical space in augmented. Color picker, you see here, different color mixing systems, cyan, magenta, and yellow. So this is a subtractive color system versus red, blue, green, which is additive. All sorts of color science videos on that and how they interact differently. But at the end of the day, the system is designed to abstract a lot of that away. So that way, when you're working in hue, saturation, X, Y on the CIE chart or gels, like that should be transparent. Red is red. And especially if you're going color profiled, gels here between multiple fixtures, leave 46 is leave 46. So you're going to get that dark magenta on all the fixtures. Again, to the degree the fixture can create that color by using color science. These are color chips and color wheels. Hue and saturation, again, still exist. This one has a variable CTO for color correction. On these fixtures are only CTO. You're adding orange because the fixtures usually have a really, really high Kelvin. So if anything, you're trying to warm up the fixture, not cool it down. Versus conventional lights, often we're using CTB. We're color correcting for blue and boosting the blue value on that. Again, fan control, color mix modes. And so here comes into form, right? So this here, if we look at just, maybe I should do this. This might be a good way to show these categories. So intensity we talked about. So there's our focus. When we come to color, we just finished talking about color and all the color options. Form, these are the form settings. So examples are iris, which is kind of your zoom in, zoom out. Edge, or you might think of as sharpness. I'm sorry, iris is an aperture, right? So that just literally chokes down the image. And we'll give some examples. It's more visible if you're using patterns, because otherwise zoom has a similar optical effect, but it does work very differently. Edge is, if you want to think of sharpness, or what you would think of as like focus on a film camera. Zoom is zooming in and out, or making a projected image larger or smaller. And then the difference is iris is literally just putting a pattern effectively. Shutter is in front of the image, making it smaller. The difference is zoom is usually going to capture more light, and iris is going to reduce the light output. Again, different manufacturers manage these differently, but as a general statement, that's going to be accurate. Here is shutter, which is like your strobe, diffusion or softness, global M speed, so edge speed, some other macros in here, LED, engine, effect, crossfade speed. These are all going to be fixture dependent, so I'll close those out. Image here is where we think of gobos or patterns. So we've got gobos or patterns here. Rotational speeds, animation wheels are things you'll find under image. And then shutter. Here on this fixture, it's got framing shutters like you'd find on a Leica that frame things in from the side. And so you've got those parameters under shutter. I have in some fixtures found things like strobe. I believe I find that under shutter sometimes. I don't quote me on that, but there's an overview of all the parameters that are available. It makes sense why there's 57 channels that are needed to control these fixtures, but we'll go back to workspace 1 here. And now with these fixtures selected, I'm going to just go ahead and put those on white. And then we're going to work with regular pan tilt controls to begin with. And so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring everything out to home. I'm going to record Q1, and I'm just going to call this pre-show. This is like my preset. This is where things are to begin with. And then again, we're just going to focus on group 20 for the moment. I'm going to bring those up to full. And I'm going to set this position, and I'm going to record this into Q3, again, just to kind of keep with our earlier example. And I'm just going to say beams up. And so again, if I go from a blank Q into Q1 and then into Q3, you can see them tilting forward because their home position where they live in Q1 is straight up, okay? And so they're going to come into that position. And so what we're going to do here, oh, you know what? I had values in there, so that's why it's looking like that. So I'm going to delete Q1, and then I'm going to take, I'm going to sneak everything out, and I'm going to record a blank. Go back, no Q, so go to Q out. No value set anywhere. If we look at the live table, nothing is set. Pan and tilt is 0. And so I'll record once. That's our blank Q. When we go to Q1, pan and tilt is 0. When I go into 3, because they aren't set anywhere, they're staying there. So let's go ahead and tilt those back down. So group 20, moving light controls. We're going to tilt those down. Maybe we'll make it really extreme like that, like a nice straight out. So we'll update that in Q3. So when I go back to go to Q out, and I go to Q1, if I bring up my live table here, you can see pan and tilt to 0. So now when I go into Q3, they come down just like that. And then, again, like we showed earlier, I could do group 20, mark, enter, update, enter. And now that live move goes away, the X shows up there. So now when we go back to Q out, 0, 0 into Q1, you see it's marking for Q3, so it's setting that to the Q3 values. Also, you can see there that as it's doing it, you can see how the green is slightly lighter, and then once it reaches that actual value, it's dark green. In fact, if I come here, we'll go back, control spacebar, you can see that as it's light green, they're still moving, and it's not until they've actually reached their position that they go to the solid green there. And so we've now marked these so that when they come up exactly how we want. So I'm going to undo that. I don't want to update that. And so now what we want is, let's see, I think I went back too far. I did. So group 20, ML controls, we'll tilt these down to like here, update. And so again, this is behaving exactly the way we'd expect. It kind of swoops down. But let's just say, for example, we didn't want the swoop down. We wanted a swoop up. And so this is where a dark move actually comes in helpful. So I'll go back to, maybe I'll leave it in Q3, for example, group 20. I'm going to tilt these all the way, maybe not that far down, but like that. So we're going to start there. But I want it out, so I'll do minimum intensity, and I'll say record Q2. So now we get that dark move. And so now what our effective result is, I'll back us out just a little bit, is as we move into 2, behind the scenes we don't see it, the fixtures move, you can see they go all the way up and they're going to tilt all the way down to that lower position. So that way when I come up in 3, as they're coming on, they're moving and kind of like a rising up. And you can imagine, like, I think of like the THX swell that you used to have on movies, like, woo, like, that would be the effect. And so I want them coming from a position, and I want them intentionally moving while they're emitting light, but I want them coming from a very specific situation, so that's why there's that dark move in there. And so that's a case, for example, of where, especially in like high performance concerts or things like that, where no, I don't want the system trying to help me by auto-marking anything. I don't want the lights to come up here. I want them to come up at that lower position and sweep up. And you can imagine how this affects any other parameter like color might be. So color and position are probably the two that I do the most live moves with. I occasionally do stuff with gobos that are considered live moves as well. So hopefully that gives you some information about live moves and dark moves, and just a quick introduction to those things. And we're coming up on an hour, and that's all I have for us today. So we're going to call this like training session 1 or training session 2.5 or 2A. And so I did a quick save. I should just go in here. I'm going to come in here and go save. And we're going to save this as, keep the version in there. So we're going to trading 2.1 maybe, because that's all we got to today. Moving lights, as you see, a lot more involved, a lot more things to do. So come back and I'll record another one hopefully sooner than we did last time. All right, thanks so much. Like and subscribe, and then do check out that first video if you haven't seen it already. Put questions down below. I try to answer those as best as I can, and have a great week.